11 days, Governor Sarah Palin will officially leave office and become a private citizen. And this week, she appears to have started auditioning for what she wants her new role to be in the Republican Party. Her audition is essentially a wonky op-ed published in the Washington Post, decrying the cap-and-trade provision in the president's energy plan, which would reduce the emissions that cause global warming. Governor Palin's op-ed, of course, includes an obligatory swipe at the chattering class. That would be me. And lest we lose touch with her patented folksiness in this non-Twitter medium, there is, for the record, exactly one unnecessary exclamation point in the op-ed. But aside from those signatures Sarah Palin flourishes, it appears to be boilerplate Republican argument on a boilerplate Republican policy issue. And in putting it out there, Governor Palin seems to be trying to position herself as a Republican Party ideas person, a new conservative policy wonk, maybe in the mold of a Newt Gingrich or an Eric Cantor. It's a logical, totally understandable strategic move for somebody trying to set themselves up for their political future. It's also not working out very well so far, because Governor Palin appears to have forgotten to consult her own record on the subject before writing the op-ed. Remember, the op-ed is against cap and trade, against capping emissions. Here's Governor Palin at the vice presidential debate last October.
Do you support capping carbon emissions?
I do.
Oops. Here's her elaborating on what appears to have been sort of downright enthusiastic support for cap and trade in her famous interview with Katie Couric.
John McCain proposed legislation calling for mandatory caps on global warming gases or CO2 emissions. Do you agree with that?
I support his position on that, absolutely.
But he has somewhat backtracked on the campaign trail, saying the caps wouldn't be mandatory. So what do you think? Do you think voluntary caps go far enough, or they should be mandatory?
He's got a good cap and trade policy that he supports, and the details are being hashed out even right now. But in principle, absolutely, I support all that we can do to reduce emissions and to clean up this planet.
We got to reduce emissions. He's got a good cap and trade policy. To make matters even worse, here's what the McCain-Palin campaign website said during the election season. It's a page that isn't posted online anymore for obvious reasons, but it's been preserved in time by a group focused on tracking candidates' positions, a group called See Through the Podium. Quote, John McCain and Sarah Palin have proposed a cap-and-trade system that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A climate cap-and-trade mechanism would set a limit on greenhouse gas emissions. A cap-and-trade system harnesses human ingenuity. So you notice she didn't used to call it a cap and tax program like she does now, back when it was part of her platform as a candidate for vice president of the United States. It does take a truly out-of-the-box thinker to come out so boldly against one's own policy positions, but it may not set one up well to be a policy wonk in the future. Joining us now is Washington Post blogger Ezra Klein. He wrote about Palin's Washington Post op-ed this week on his Washington Post blog, Meow. Thanks for coming on the show, Ezra. Nice to see you.
Great to see you, Rachel.
I can't think of you without thinking of the old tagline on your blog, Mama said wonk you out. So tell me this from a wonk's perspective. Was Governor Palin's anti-cap and trade op-ed sort of in the mainstream in terms of Republican energy policy, or is she out on her own here?
You know, I wouldn't really call it anywhere in terms of policy. Governor Sarah Palin missed a bunch of the sort of key policy concepts in cap and trade, including, among other things, the words global warming, climate change, carbon emissions, all things that figured into the questions you just replayed her being asked a moment ago. But, you know, she plays into, I think, what the Republican minority is doing, which is not so much having a global warming policy as having an opposition to a global warming policy. So in that, you know, she probably is in the mainstream, but I wouldn't consider it a policy position. I would consider it a sort of an opposition orientation.
In terms of the dynamics of Republican Party politics and, I guess, conservative politics more broadly is a better way to put it, what does it mean that she is coming out against her own previous position in favor of cap and trade? Is this going to, which is more of a liability for her in conservative circles, to be for it or to be against it?
To be for it is definitely going to be more of a liability. You know, I think conservatives are going to use this as they see it as the weakness for Obama, right? It is on some level an energy tax. It's one that will get rebated to people. It's one that will save the globe from becoming sort of crispy over time, but it is nevertheless taxes. People don't like them. It will be a tricky thing to sell, and so I think she's in the mainstream of it there. I think she's going to face a bit of trouble though, because Sarah Palin is caught between a rock and a hard place, right? She is desperate to get credibility from, well, people like you, the mainstream media. I mean, the first thing she does after sort of quitting the governorship, although she's writing this op-ed while still governor and tweeting furiously, you wonder sort of what she's spending her day doing. But she comes out with a pretty wonky op-ed. She wants to be taken seriously as a thinker, and that isn't going well yet. This read a little bit like somebody who had heard policy speeches but hadn't understood them. It had this sort of language you see in a policy speech, but it didn't all fit together. It was a bit of a strange outing.
The reason that Sarah Palin continues to be so newsworthy is because she is so popular. And in trying to think about what the Republican Party of the future looks like, we, I think, have to consider a Republican Party in which Sarah Palin has a major role. I think with this op-ed, she's signaling that she'd like that role to be a policy role. From what you know about conservative and Republican politics and what she said here, can you tell what the Republican Party future policy would be on energy if Sarah Palin's in it? Would it be a repudiation of what John McCain was in favor of during the campaign?
I mean, it looks a little bit like that. It certainly is a repudiation of what John McCain was in favor of before his campaign, when he was sort of one of his signal issues as a moderate, as a compromiser, was that he was for a true cap-and-trade plan. Had its problems, but was fundamentally a good plan. But, she is... I really would caution against saying that, she wants her future to be in ideas. She wants her future to be in opposition. It's what she knows how to do. And the people she's popular with are not so much the country, it's the media. I mean, when she quit a week ago or 10 days ago, whatever it was, she went up and said, the problem is that engaging with the media is taking too much time from my job. And now the first thing she does is publish in my paper. It seems a bit like the real problem was that her job was taking too much time from engaging with the media.
Ezra Klein, very smart points. Ezra writes an online column for the Washington Post. Thanks so much for joining us. It's nice to see you, Ezra.
Thank you.
Metaphors aside, we do not often hear about sharks on Capitol Hill. But today, a group of shark attack survivors lobbied to protect the razor-toothed ocean predators that injured them. Coming up next, we'll talk to Mike Degree, who's a shark attack survivor and a filmmaker. Stay with us. But first, one more thing, not about Sarah Palin, but about the state of which she is governor for another week and a bit. Off the Alaska coast, there currently floats a big, gnarly blob of goo in the Chukchi Sea. That's the sea between Alaska and Russia. The black slime reportedly stretches for more than 10 miles. Officials say it's been hanging off ice, tangling up jellyfish, and someone even turned into their local wildlife department the remains of a dead goose, just bones and feathers that they found tangled up in the blob. The Coast Guard insists that the blob looks and smells like something that is alive. They're saying they don't think it's anything like an oil spill. Samples of the slime are being tested to find out exactly what it is. We should have results of those tests hopefully next week. Meanwhile, maybe this explains the waiters?